I'm most concerned about for my grandchildren, and I have to speak on the grandsons first. You know, it's a really bad war out there for young black men. And I just want them to be protected. I want them to make sure that they get an education because that can't hurt, it can only help. I want them to live.
Grandmas hold a special place in our culture. We cherish their endless love. We admire their skills in the kitchen. We rely on them as babysitters. We hold them up as examples of honesty and moral purity. But did my grandmother and the women like her make such sacrifices out of choice or due to a lack of choice? To meet the expectations set for them by society to be a strong, eat last type of matriarch? Were they the result of wonderful character traits or the oppressive demands of American society, or both? For our grandmothers, what are the motivations and forces behind their seemingly superhuman abilities? What's going on, y'all? It's Jordan Theory here with Dream Chase Life. Welcome to episode 6 of Grandma's Roses featuring Gail. Gail is the mother of my good friend and former roommate in college, Jason. Jason was just a couple years older than me, but when I'm 18 and he's 20, that was a big difference. And so he was like a mentor, sort of a big brother figure, and I kind of looked up to him, and he kind of helped show me the ropes of the college and just taught me a lot about, early adulthood. And one of the funniest dudes I've ever known. And also just a dude that had really strong values and walked with a lot of dignity. And it wasn't until I got to sit down with his mom and really have this long conversation with her that I kind of understand why and where that came from. Gail, also a very strong woman, strong personality. And in this interview, she's going to be talking about what she did to prepare her kids for moving from the projects in Chicago out to the suburbs into a completely different environment. And so she's also going to talk about some of the lessons that she tried to impart upon her kids throughout that process. She's going to talk about the difference for her between being a mother and a grandmother. And then she's also just going to kind of impart some wisdom for the next generation of youth on some pieces that she wished she knew when she was growing up. So meet Gail.
After I moved out of my mom's house when I was 19, and Douglas, the oldest, was a toddler. I don't even think he might have been walking. But we literally moved on the opposite side of a viaduct in the public housing. I lived in Rockwell in the high rises. But any of my kids to this day will tell you that I always instilled in them that you are in this, but you're not of it. And what I meant by that, I wasn't trying to berate anybody living in public housing, but I know what the stigma is regarding public housing. And so my children were never allowed to, if they were going to be outside playing, I was down there sitting on the bench where they were playing. Another thing that I would always make sure that I did is that I always took them out of their element so that they could see other things beside what I deemed the playground as the asphalt jungle. I always told them something that my brother-in-law told his kids, and that was, it's not a matter of if you're going to college, it's just a matter of where you're going to go to college. So I always tried to put some building blocks there for them. And when I can remember, I guess the older ones were like about 11 and 13, and I acquired a housing voucher. And I moved, and I chose to, it wasn't mandatory, but I think you had to go to an area where there were only 30% minority. you couldn't just like move down the street if you were still in the same area of the one set type of people. So I took that as an advantage. I moved my kids out to an area in DuPage County called Glendale Heights. And from that point, I had to kind of give them a little comeuppance once again, especially my boys. And I told them, I said, listen, you are now going to be in situation, in an environment where there are many different types of people. But you are an African American. And I want you to remember that you are an African American. I don't need you to change or to be different, or you're not better than anyone and they're not better than you. So I gave them like this, this little pep talk. And I don't know if I need to tell this story, but I think I need to tell this story, is that there was an occasion, and I also told them this, I said, listen, you'll also be in an area where you might meet hostility. You might be called out of your name. You might be called nigger. And I told them, I said, and if that happens, violent or not, I said, hit him in the mouth. And so my oldest son came home one day and his knuckles were bleeding. I said, Douglas, what happened to your knuckles? He said, this boy called me a nigger and I hit him in the mouth and he had braces and I didn't know it. And I said, okay. And to me, I didn't know until the next day when he came home and he was telling me, he said, you know what? He said, that boy followed me around as much as he could yesterday, apologizing. Doug, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And I said, you know what? Forgive him because he didn't know. He wasn't born with that. That was something that was taught. And I said, even though maybe that wasn't the right thing, even though I told you to do what I told you to do, that gave him a little food for thought, and he decided that this wasn't right. So it was just things like that that I had to teach them to be prepared for. And I think they fared very well. They were able to acclimate to their new environment. And then we had family in the city, so we'd still come back, So they really had a variety of understanding of both worlds. The role of a mother is to, I could probably do it in examples better. I'm thinking about my second son. There's always one kid that will try you. And then, there's the grandmama, and then there's the mama, and then here's the kid that's going to try the mother. And I don't care what he does, the grandmother is going to always understand it. Well, he didn't really mean it like that. Or he didn't, you shouldn't be so hard. And I'm like, but you saw what he did. But he was just experimenting or anything, any type of excuse. But he mass murdered 4 people. Well, he was just experiencing with death. Anything. So that grandmother is that leeway for that kid, usually. If they are a good grandparent, and that's the one, that will roll their sleeves up and do for and come to the defense of and just, unconditionally love and, lifelong excuse makers for the children. But they also will instill wisdom in, their children, of course, but their grandchildren as well. Because I could tell my children, you know what, this is winter, it's cold outside. And, no, it's not cold. My mother could say, it's winter, it's cold outside. Ooh, Burr, you're right, Grandma, it's cold. So, they look to them, the grandchildren would look to the grandparents as the one that has all the answers, that's always right, the defender, the everything that's good and great and nothing bad. So I think that grandmothers should be more appreciated. I think that if we as grandmothers would voice this, because I think when it comes to our grandchildren, they don't think about that. It's not a cruel thing. It's just a natural thing. Oh, grandma, example, I get all dialed up and jokingly or not, a grandchild might say, what you think you doing? You think you grown or where you going? So I think that it could be a perfect balance. I'm proud of my grandmotherhood, but at the same time, if I decide to put a little makeup on and go out and do me, I want them to understand that, okay, yesterday I cooked you some food, or the day before that I went to this appointment with you, but today I'm gonna do me. And you're gonna need to understand that, because if you live, one of these days you may be a grandparent, and you'll see what I'm saying. And so I think that if that can be established, and I think it can be established, it just needs to be a little more dialogue about it. We need to really discuss it. And I know we're talking about grandmothers, but I think there'll be an easier way to get through to the grandchildren as opposed to sometimes to your own children, because they quick. What you think you doing? Hey, wait a minute, ain't you married, or ain't you messing around with yourself? Well, I'm gonna do me, and I'm gonna be a grandmama. How about that? I do have last words that I would like to say to the youth. I would like to see each and every child grow up, become someone that they can be proud of. So, because if they are going to be proud of themselves, then it's going to be that domino effect. So, you already know that mom, dad, grandparents, friends, and relatives will be proud. I realize that it is a struggle, even from my generation to this generation. In my generation, there was more, in my opinion, more care and concern. And in this generation, a lot of times, these young people are really on their own. And I just hope that if this is viewed, if this is seen, that myself included, I can jump in there and become that surrogate grandparent. That I can say something that will steer a potentially lost child in the right direction. I have one example that I have to, if I can, incorporate it. When my children were little, when we were still living in the projects, I'll never forget this like yesterday, but this was years ago. There was this young man that was friends to my older son, and I would put them at about 11 or 12 years old at the time. And I was just talking to my kids about school. I used what my brother-in-law had said about it's not a matter of if you're going to college, just a matter of what college you're going to go to. And so the young man said to me, when I grow up, I want to go to college because I want to get my mother really nice things. Now, there's a backstory to this young man's mother. In the project, it was common that we lived right by a train track, and the train would go past, and sometimes it would stop, and the children, some, would run up on that track, and they would loot the train. They were able to get in there. Don't ask me how, but they would, and they would have merchandise. And this young man's mother was out there one day particularly, and she was not very well kept. And she was talking to this child. She wasn't even talking to him. She was talking at him. She was calling him everything but a child of God. But this is the very same child that sat in my house and told me he wanted to go to college so he could do things nice for his mother. So I said to him, without berating his mother, I said, you know what? First of all, we had to establish that he had a nickname, which was Boo Man. And I said to him, I said, what is your name? He said, Boo Man. I said, no, what is your real name? He said, Boo Man. I said, what does your teacher call you? He said, Stanley. I said, okay, Stanley, it's a good thing that you want to go to college. But, and if I didn't say it, he wanted to go to college so he could play football so he could get his mother nice things. I said, Stanley, it's wonderful that you want to go to college. It's wonderful that you want to play football, but focus on your academics. I said, because what if you go to college and you become a football star and you get to be a professional player, but you get injured? You need something to fall back on. And I want to think that just me saying this to Stanley gave him some kind of hope, because he was being abused and didn't know it. And like I said, I was not going to berate mom to him, but I just automatically kicked in with my mode of saying, what can I say to help him, to give him something that might stick? So that's my hope as a grandmother, to watch the grandchildren do better, be better.
Thank you for tuning in to Dream Chase Life. Please make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you're digging the content. And we're going to keep trying to bring you great videos about culture, creativity, and community. Please holler at me if you got any ideas, and share your love in the comment section below. Peace.